Hi, everyone. It looks like we have 25 people. We are recording this, so if anyone or any of your colleagues cannot make it, we plan on posting it online afterwards. So we'll give it a few more minutes and then we'll get started. Does that sound good? And yeah, so in the meantime, we have disabled the chat to prevent any sort of distractions, but obviously feel free to type in things like David has in the Q&A section and obviously any questions. So we'll be trying to moderate the question section as we go along, and then we'll also leave some time at the end to answer things live. Okay, give it one more minute. All right. Okay, so let's get started. Hi, everyone. My name is Angela Hwang. I am the Education Outreach Manager of Nano at Stanford. And so I'm the lead on the Technical Content Development Working Group. And in short, that sort of talks about any sort of online training resources or educational resources that we've been trying to provide for our lab members. And so with me today, I have Maude Cuchiara from RTNN. I have David Jones and Eric Johnston from the Singh Center at Penn. And yeah, so if you guys want to introduce yourself, I can just jump right in.
Okay.
Okay, all right. So, okay, an overview. So what have we been doing? Especially, I'd like to talk about what have we been doing in the meantime during COVID? How are we engaging our users remotely? What kind of content exactly are we talking about? Like the what and the why? And then we'll sort of go through a series of little mini case studies of how have we created and or applied the content and developed any sort of educational resources. So the idea is that you will learn from our mistakes, hopefully, and get some tips and tricks. And the things that we've been covering are webinars, massive open online courses, otherwise known as MOOCs, any sort of hired help that we've been leveraging, like graduate students, and then video production. And then again, we'll have some time for questions. Okay, so there are multiple ways to engage users remotely. At least for Stanford, we've been trying to do a lot of webinars like this one, but then also things that are a little bit more, or labs have these process clinics that happen typically in person. And so what we've been doing is moving that remotely, and it's been somewhat successful. So we have Zoom time, and we also have office hours for people to do one-on-one consulting. We've also been able to do webinars. So one here is from Stanford. So Marcin organized an AFM seminar series. It was supposed to be in person, but then we obviously had to pivot, and it was pretty successful. We had almost 500 people register and about 300 people actually come. So I think that was really successful. I've also done some outreach remotely, and I think Maude has actually done that as well with great success. We've also been trying to engage users in the meantime, in the downtime, get some surveys. So one of our lab managers, Jason, sort of emailed and had a discussion on what the clean room is going to look like, you know, in the future, what we've been calling the new normal. And then obviously the educational courses that Maude and I have sort of been talking about quite a lot, but again, the massive open online courses and how we can sort of alleviate some of the training for the lab managers to sort of focus on more research-based projects. And so the content, so the biggest thing is what is content, right? So what we consider it as high quality text, videos, figures, animations, quizzes that are used as educational materials to support training. So here are just a few examples of that. I've just found that especially when it comes to developing a course, and Maude will get into this again, there are copyright issues, so you do have to create some of your own figures. And you know, what is the purpose of this? Reducing staff load, providing consistency of training. using it as a training resource. So either to correct something, say, hey, you're doing something wrong, you need to fix it, and or, you know, some people are taking training, front loading their training, and they aren't able to remember what's going on. So this can sort of serve as something to refresh themselves with. And then obviously maintaining social distancing. And we, at least Stanford, is thinking about how to do a lot of remote trainings, either through webinars and things like that. So, okay, so the biggest thing is preparation, and you'll see this as a thread throughout our entire training session here. So planning is key, and so we've learned a lot from that. One big thing is that whenever you make a video, they are really time intensive, but they're also the most useful, especially when it comes to clean room techniques. There's a lot of nuance when it comes to being recording someone putting on their gloves, or how are they pouring some sort of chemical in the wet bench and things like that. And then again, get help. There's quite a large learning curve when it comes to creating content, making it make sense, putting it in order, and also just, you know, this type of content is going to be viewed by different types of people. Some people may have a very heavy biology background. Some people may have a heavy electrical engineering background, or are totally novice to certain things. So having different perspectives and getting help is really useful, especially with university resources. For example, Stanford has a whole department, the Vice Provost of Teaching and Learning, that has a whole subsection that's devoted to online learning. And they have actually really helped us when it comes to onboarding ourselves onto new platforms and getting all of the sort of nitty-gritty admin stuff accomplished. And then one thing, my best word of advice overall is being patient. A lot of the creation of these materials are sort of a high activation energy barrier, where you invest a lot of time and energy into the content creation, but eventually that will pay off in the end, where a lot of it is sort of set it and forget it. But you do have to take some time when it comes to iterating on maybe the video. Oh, the angle is bad. Oh, we didn't include this step. Oh, there might be something funny going on in the background. Or even just, is the language correct, or something that's sort of a reading material. So it will take some iterations as well. And then, so our applications, so what are some examples of that? So the biggest thing, and I think what has been quite successful for us, is we've created this edX course, and we've integrated some of the modules into our staff trainings. So generally speaking, the user, or the new lab, the learner would watch and read the content. Usually it's a mix of video and reading material, and then either take a quiz or just achieve a certain score. Each of our lab managers have decided sort of what best fits their particular tool or their particular training. And then there's some sort of sign off. So either they take an additional in-person training to make sure that the particular learner has, you know, understood all the different components that they needed to, and or just a checking off that they've done the content or done the course. And again, content can be used as a reference resource. I think the RTNN group also sort of had been creating their own Coursera course as part of marketing, just to showcase some of the tools that they have at their facilities. Okay. And then one thing is, when you are applying the content, if it's a video, we'll talk about a little bit more about what's important about the video. But a big thing is making sure it's a little bit interactive at the very least. So having quizzes are really wonderful when it comes to making sure the learner is engaged, or at least paying attention and digesting that content. So some of the quizzes we do score, and then some of them it can be pop-ups, which is really great, especially on the massive open online courses like edX and Coursera. Okay, and then webinars like this one. So at least our facility has been really relying on Zoom lately. There are a few things that we've learned over the past month or so. When you are using Zoom, there's a wonderful option where you can do webinar instead of a meeting. So this is obviously a webinar. There's a lot more limitations to what an attendee can do versus a panelist. So you should utilize those roles to your advantage, because then you can mute people. You know, obviously with a big meeting, it can be very chaotic. So the panelists have more options when it comes to what they can do, and sort of limiting the attendees, unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on your audience. And then what's also been helpful for some people is to have co-hosts. So with big events, you know, the internet may not work or your internet may not work. And so you don't want to just fall off and leave the rest of your attendees waiting for you. So having a co-host has been helpful. Rehearsals. So we actually had several rehearsals because we were both sort of learning and teaching at the same time. So we were having one of our colleagues sort of serve as an attendee to sort of practice how to use the Zoom features, because there have been a lot of Zoom features and even Zoom features under development as this has all been happening. So we highly recommend rehearsals. The automatic reminders have also been very good, in the sense that, you know, people forget, people say, oh, I'm gonna do this, I'll opt in, and then just sort of forget about it. It's not added to their calendar, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah. Oh, and then our webinar is quite short, so I think that's a little bit different. But for example, Marston's was almost a half day seminar where there were 3 different talks. And so he split it up nicely between the talks for a 5 or 10-minute break to make sure they could transition smoothly, as well as just, you know, not be staring at a screen for 4 hours straight. Okay, and then like, for example, this particular talk is also going to be recorded and uploading them as references later. The biggest thing, I think, is making sure you get permission to post them, depending on what the content entails. So with Marston's webinar, some of the work was unpublished, so we actually redacted the video or parts of the video before we posted it online. So that's an example. And then big things that have been really great, especially with some of the Zoom meetings, are the Q&A, some polling features where you can sort of do an in situ you know, survey of what's going on, chat features. Oh, the breakout rooms have been really interesting. I've been doing, or I attended a little mini workshop, and so we had a large discussion and then broke into groups to have more discussion, especially because there is sort of a maximum of who, or the number of people that can be talking at once, where you're not just getting a big headache. So the breakout rooms have been really great. And then after the webinar, obviously you have the recording. You can also look at the attendee report to check your engagement to see, you know, what worked, what didn't work. You can also send up follow-up emails. Actually at the close of the webinar, you can have a pop-up survey. So we're actually going to do that to you later. So I hope you can fill out that survey of sort of, you know, did this webinar entail what you wanted, et cetera, et cetera. All right. And then again, collecting the data. Oh, this is the URL that I was talking about. And then you can even add little like social media share buttons if you want. And this is an example of what Marston did over here, where he had the workshop attendance and sort of mapped, you know, he actually had a pretty good number of attendance, people paying attention. So yeah. Okay, and so I am actually going to switch it over to Maude. So Maude, if you don't mind, start screen sharing. Great, and I will stop.
All right. Hold on. Of course, this is not. We practiced, and now it's not. Are you guys able to see my screen? Yes or no?
I see your screen, but it says sharing with others. If you
I don't know what that is going on.
That.
Done. I think I did the press share.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
Okay. My apologies. And we did practice. I promise, guys. We did. So massive open online courses. So Angela alluded to this. So Stanford has an online course hosted on edX, and RTNN has one that is hosted on Coursera. So the nice thing about MOOCs is that they offer a lot of different functionality. So we can, you know, integrate easily video and quizzes and other resources into the platform itself, which makes it a really nice and nice and easy to use. And it can also offer sophisticated analytical tools. So we can know who our learners are, where they're coming from, different demographic information. And we can also know kind of how they're engaging with the content and whether or not they like it. So it's a really nice feature. And again, I think this is going to be a theme throughout. It is very time intensive to create a massive open online course. So although now it's launched and it's really nice to have it and people are using it and enjoying it, but it took probably about 18 months from start to finish, where we started planning all the way to when it was actually online and able for learners to access. So again, it can be, that's one limitation. The other thing is, because you're using a platform that's not necessarily integrated with your university or not with your just a facility website, you're going to have to meet requirements that are necessitated by the platform itself. So Coursera, for example, you can't really use copyrighted figures willy-nilly. You have to have the permission to use copyrighted figures notated and things like that. So it's going to take a lot more work. So it's not necessarily the best thing to use if you're adding content gradually, or you want a little bit more flexibility. One other feature is that you can use is certifications. So that enables people to get a certificate for completing the course. And it costs them a little bit of money, but the university, our course is hosted on Duke's Coursera platform. And so Duke will make some money that can feed into their online learning division, but it also will kick back to the RTNN at some point, and we're going to use that for to help support some of our Kickstarter awards, so free access to our tools. As Angela mentioned, at Stanford, they have an online learning office, or probably called different things at different universities, and Duke has one of these as well. So the nice thing about these is they have experience in helping you develop content and know what works and what doesn't, and then they can help with some of the administrative types of functions like uploading things into the course platform itself, which is also another time-intensive thing to do. So the only kind of downside of that is that you also are going to have to meet their requirements if you're using them. So when we were making our Coursera course, we had to create storyboards and we had to write scripts, which both are good things, but you have to do all of that before you start shooting your video. So there is a lot of work involved. Another good resource, and this is going to depend again on the institution you're at, is your distance learning office. So for example, at NC State, there's a distance learning office that can help create courses and help with video support. So videography, they have professionals that can help with that if you're creating videos for existing courses. So this may be an alternative for people who have lab courses that use the facilities, and then maybe you can bring in some people from your distance learning office and help you create some of your video content. And both of these options are nice if your funds are limited, because they're going to be a lot cheaper than hiring outside of the university. Another nice thing about the NC State's briefly distance learning program is that they have grants for developing new courses that they put on their own platform. So I would encourage you to investigate what options are available at your university. The other thing that's really something that was new to me and something I didn't think about was using copyrighted figures. And maybe all of us are guilty of just going on Google, searching for an image that we want, throwing it in a presentation and not worrying about it. So that's not okay on Coursera, the Coursera platform, or potentially edX as well. So this may just be true to these online courses, but I would really urge people to make sure that you're using images and copyrighted figures appropriately. So one option, as Angela mentioned, is you can recreate figures that you're going to use, but you can also get permission to use. And that's a great option if, for example, you're using something from a journal article that's somebody's data that is not going to be possible to recreate in any kind of meaningful way. Libraries are a great resource that's going to come up often throughout this webinar today. Librarians are, there's probably a librarian on staff at your university that is an expert in copyright and licensing, and they can definitely help with getting permission to use, or at least guiding you on how to approach integrating content into your video or slides or whatever you need to do. The easiest thing to do is probably find free and or shareable alternatives. So images or songs that are in the public domain, that's a great way to go if you're able to. Another thing that I came across that some of you may be familiar with, but I was not familiar with when we started the development of our Coursera course, was Creative Commons licensing. And so this type of licensing is encompasses a lot of different types of media, from images to video to songs to software. And it's often used when the author or creator of the work wants to share their work and they want people to build off of it. So these types of licenses, they really want you to use their work. They're denoted by CC. So you may have seen this on a website or something where it will say CC by blah, 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 and that denotes that it's a Creative Commons license. And you'll see that in the link at the top of the page, that will take you to the Creative Commons website, which can explain more if you have questions after this webinar, because by no means am I an expert in Creative Commons licensing. I will say, though, that there are 6 different types of licenses that different media can undergo, and each has its own set of sharing and use rules. And so if you look on that first bullet point from left to right, it goes from least to most restrictive. And each of those 2-letter acronyms stands for something different. So for example, by means that you need to credit where the piece of media is coming from. So you just need to put somebody's name, and there's a standard way for doing this, and I'll show that in a subsequent slide. Non-commercial means that you can't use it for some commercial purpose, like Coursera does make money, so we can't typically use something that has that type of license. No derivatives means you can't change it in any way. You can use something, but you can't change it. So for example, if a song has this type of license, you couldn't slow down the tempo to fit your video more perfectly. And share alike, this is kind of a confusing one, but it basically means you have to license the new work that you made. So like, let's say you took somebody's figure and you added some text boxes to it to make it more digestible to your user base. You would have to then license that new creation using the same type of license that the original had. So it's a little bit tricky. And when I was doing the Coursera course, or we were doing the Coursera course, we really tried to stick to the 2 license types that are in bold there. What's even better though is if you can get a CC0, which basically means there's no restrictions. It's similar to the public domain. You don't have to attribute it to anyone. And one thing you can do is go to the Creative Commons website, and this is linked here in the PowerPoint or the Google Slides. You can search for images, video, and music that have specific license types. So I wanted to just go into a little bit about where you can find different images that are not copyrighted and that are free to use, because I thought it would be a good resource moving forward for you when you're developing any kind of content. One is you can just use a regular search engine like Google or Bing. There's typically an advanced image search, and you can find images that are free to use and share. I would urge you to be cautious when you're doing this, because you want to make sure you're using the original source of whatever it is, an image or a song or a video, because it's hard to know if somebody copied the image from somewhere else and didn't do it appropriately. So again, I would proceed with caution with this type of search. There's a ton of free stock image sites online. There's 4 listed here. There's probably more. If you can't find exactly what you need, they often have links to other images that fit your needs that are costly. So you can pay for images if you do want something that's specific. There's also Flickr is another website that has a lot of photos on it. You can search, they have a library that's a Creative Commons library where you can search for images, again, with those different license types that I described on the previous slide. And that is where I found this lovely image of the Singh Center where David and Eric are coming from. So this is at UPenn. I searched nanotechnology, and you can see that I attributed it. I didn't change it because it's an ND image. I will say though that it is an image from UPenn, so hopefully UPenn was on board with this. So again, if you ever have questions, I would encourage you to ask someone who is an expert, probably somebody at the library. They can help with this. Another cool resource I found was this British Library Commons. It's also on Flickr. And I found this old image of a microscope from a book. They have some really neat stuff from 1893. So you can find a lot of different content online that's free to use. And again, ask your library. So this link specifically goes to NC State's College of Design library that has a lot of different resources for different types of images. And then audio and music. So we all have audio and music in our video content. It's really nice. It can enrich your content. It can provide something there when you're showing something but don't have any other audio from people that you want to use. Again, you have to make sure it's relatively free or you can pay, and I'll give you a couple of resources in a moment. You want to choose something that's upbeat and cheery, not something that's somber and going to put people to sleep. I would recommend having it go through a couple of different sets of ears to make sure it fits with what the message you're trying to convey. Excuse me. And again, you don't want it to be too loud. So not just with the audio of whoever's talking, but if there's something on an instrument that you're trying to show and you want to capture some audio in that way, you want to make sure that this background music's not overpowering in the video content. Generally, you can find a lot of music online that's free to use, but you need to provide credit again. So YouTube is a great resource. There's a couple different other audio sources linked here where you can search by a specific genre or beat or tempo. And then there's also a sound effects library, which can be helpful in animations, which Angela is going to discuss in a moment. So for example, if you're pumping down a vacuum, you might want to have that kind of a sound in your animation. And so this is a great resource for that. So again, go to your library and see if they have any other resources. And with that, I'll turn it over to Angela, who's going to talk to you more about the animations that I mentioned.
Okay, can you guys see me, hear me? Okay. All right, so I wanted to also go through some of the work that we had been doing when it comes to creating images in an animation. So one thing is, again, find help. We have hired freelancers from Upwork and Fiverr, which are sort of these subcontractor companies. They've been really helpful. It does take a little bit of finding the right person, but they've had really great outcomes. Another thing is obviously you can hire some undergrads or even some communication offices. I think like Department of Engineering has a lot of support. So that has been really wonderful as well. The biggest thing I would say is since these people are the people who you hire are typically, they don't have a science background or have a limited science background, to provide as many examples as you can. Some of the things that you're trying to convey are pretty abstract. So giving many examples so you can pull all those images that you found through the Google search, and then make a little bit of a storyboard up here. Oops. Up here on the right. So you're able to sort of pick the style notes, give examples. So this is actually pulled from, I think, an old paper that then we transformed into this little cute animation that we created. But yeah, the biggest thing, style notes, especially consistency. I wanted to get nice colors that fit into the rest of our sort of Stanford brand theme, etc. And then making sure, and again, the reviews process, having people take a look at it multiple times, walking the artist or the graphic designer through the images as well. So that has been really helpful too. And again, be patient because eventually they'll come out really beautiful. Oh, and another thing I wanted to mention was sort of getting help. So a big thing that has been helpful for our particular program has been these graduate student fellowships. And I know Penn has also been working on something similar, as well as work study. But obviously you as staff, or many of you who have signed on as staff, your priorities are more on in-person training, maintaining the tool, and it's very hard to just sit down and write something down. So we came up with the idea of leveraging some of the graduate students. So they are new learners, and I think if you're a fresh learner, you sort of remember what it takes to become an expert on the tool. And so we have these fellowships where they're focused on supporting new or non-traditional users and the lab community at large in obtaining background knowledge on instruments, tools, and or processes. So we've had about 15 or 16 fellowships that have been quite successful that helped us make an XPS module or an SEM module. And so the idea is that the students, they get to learn the process of making something, accessible in a technical way. And then we also provide some support on the tool itself to get some of the information. And then the staff, as a mentor, they get the training content and or new processes or updated manuals and things like that. So with that, I'm actually going to hand it over to, I believe, Eric, and who's going to do a deep dive on video development.
Okay, hi everybody. Thanks, Angela. So I'm going to be talking about the video development and do it this way. So I'm in charge of soft lithography, but I'm also in charge of basically the user program. So it was my job to create a video to replace part of our orientation, which ended up being about like around 25 minutes worth of video, which doesn't seem like it's that much, but it's actually kind of a lot. So I would call that a large scale video. So I just want to go through the outline of what I'm going to talk about, which is number one, planning. You may have seen that as a previously in this webinar. The video capture, how you actually grab that video, the audio and voiceover for that, and editing. So and then within editing, you also have file organization and review by others. So talking about planning. So planning, like we were saying, it will save you a lot of time. It's some work at the beginning, but it'll save you time in the long run. It helps you to get shots in an orderly process, and especially with a clean room where you have to get gowned up to go inside. It's especially useful to not have to be going in and out all the time. So you have less reshooting to correct your mistakes. So studios have always used storyboards to outline their movies, but my guess is most universities don't have a storyboard artist on staff. So I came up with a kind of a substitute. So what I created was two columns, one which basically had the script and one that had the corresponding camera shots. So the script on the left side was the actual, the actual expectation of the spoken script that you'd be hearing as a voiceover. And on the right side was the corresponding shots that you would see that you would want for that part of the script. So they basically line up from left to right. So just a note for smaller projects, let's say like tool training, the planning is still very useful, and I would say required to do that. But that might just involve maybe 20 to 30 minutes of going over exactly what you need to convey to use the tool correctly, how to troubleshoot, that kind of thing. But pretty much everything I'm talking about would apply also to these smaller projects. So let's talk about video capture, where you're actually, in our case, in the clean room, most likely with some sort of video capture device. So first, number one is preparing our quote unquote set. So one thing that I sort of thought was important, but I didn't really pay that much attention to it at the beginning, and I kind of looked back and I was like, oh, I should have really done this, was really going over the area and removing things that sort of don't belong, things that maybe that might make it a little bit untidy, when you see the video. Actually, one of the things that you don't want to do is is have things in there that like the viewer is going to see and find it distracting, and then they sort of lose the message of what your video is trying to convey, because they're saying, what is that broom doing over in the corner, instead of paying attention to the message you're trying to send. Also, just be aware if somebody has their laptop up, during this video capture, you could conceivably capture information that they really don't want people to know about. So just be aware of that maybe they close their laptops or they point in another direction, just so you're not accidentally capturing that. Just be wary of clocks. This is another sort of distraction. It's like, oh, it said, 5:45 before, now it says 3:25, and it's like that. It's not really a big deal, but it's something that people can be distracted by. And again, remove the extraneous materials that that may be a distraction, but also you don't necessarily want to remove everything. I think you do want it to look like a real clean room. If people have wafers out, I don't see a reason to remove wafers. That's what happens in a clean room. But also, don't set a bad example. In this case, our requirement is if you've dispensed chemicals, you should be covering it, so that I think that's really an EPA requirement. So to minimize evaporation. As you can see clearly, if we had used this video in our orientation video, it would have been immortalized in our orientation video, and people would, may or may not notice it, but you don't want that to be immortalized in your video. So I want to talk about just, in the interest of time, just take one quick example. And this is an example of mine, is just like labeling. This point of this clip is just to show the proper labeling, our proper labeling of a dispensed chemical. So we start out by writing the label for the chemical, and this is an example where it's like, well, this didn't really turn out exactly the way I wanted, because that's me in the shot. I'm left-handed. You can see that I'm writing something, but it's not, the little sheet of paper is not really in the shot. It probably should have been shot from the other side, but it's okay, but I would have preferred a different way. The label should be written out prior to dispensing the chemical, so you can see that I wrote it out and now I'm dispensing the chemical, so that's good. Full disclosure, I had another scene where it was the reverse, where the chemical was already dispensed, then we had to write out the label, which we had forgotten to do, and it was virtually impossible to reverse that, to sort of go back and fix it. We just had to stay with it. It is an important thing. We didn't want to go back and then reshoot it, but it's something, that's again where the planning is important. Dish should be set near the center or back of the bench. That's, I'm bringing this up because what you don't want to be doing is conveying something that's not the proper way to be doing things. If you're going to be dispensing a chemical, you don't want it near the front of the bench, because a lot of any sort of evaporative fumes could be end up in your face rather than going up the exhaust. So you want to make sure that you're not doing anything that is improper in that video. And just we just wanted to have a shot of the label, just to drive home that this is what a label looks like. And I can tell you that labeling of chemicals, you probably know this too, labeling of chemicals is one of these things that we're constantly shaking our users. And it's like, did you forget something here? And they've always forgotten to label their chemical. So this is something that we're trying to drive home always in our orientation. Other things about video capture, so don't set a bad example. Don't violate basic safety protocols. So for example, this is some footage we captured. We had this lovely user doing some work. She went to dispense, I think it was like ethanol or IPA, and proceeds to pull the entire bottle outside of the bench to dispense it, which is clearly not proper. So be aware of those things before you go and actually capture this stuff. For me, like would not consider myself a sophisticated videographer. Here's an example of recording, just entering our clean room, something very simple. And my inclination is just, okay, here's the action. You're going into the clean room. But if you wanted to make it a little bit more professional, you really should have the person coming into the screen. So coming in from the left side, swiping in and going in. That's really a little more professional. It's not super important, but it does give us sort of a softer look and a more professional look. Also, B-roll. So what is B-roll? It's any sort of supplementary video that's secondary to your primary footage, but ends up being really quite useful. So examples, and you never know when you're going to use it. So examples are like just panning across bays, just having that available, whether you really have any plans to use it or not. Panning across individual tools and benches. Just sort of users milling about in the lab. That's always kind of nice to have. Also, with regard to capture, so using your smartphone is really not a bad idea. The smartphones are pretty good with collecting video. Just make sure you hold that phone horizontally. So audio. So clean rooms tend to have excessive white noise, which is pretty difficult to move. Even if you have a pretty good microphone, it's difficult to remove that white noise. So we don't recommend using the audio track from your raw video. So we suggest using separate voiceover as the audio. So you can hire a freelancer, use Audio Jungle, to purchase voiceovers and I guess the fee is pretty small. I used something called Amazon Poly, and I think Google has something similar, which is a text-to-speech function that can be used through the Amazon Web Service platform. And they really make their money on volume, so it's really it hardly costs anything at all to do this. And this is what it looks like. You've got, use my pointer here. You've got basically a text here which has a little bit of code in it. You can select a male voice, female voice. You can also select different languages and different accents, which is pretty handy. And then you can basically you can run the code, so to speak, and then download the MP3 from there, and there you have your synthetic voice. Just a point here is that it's for the editing phase, this is pretty good, but I think in the end, it's not a great voice in the end. You really want it, if you've got everything sort of finalized, I would suggest having somebody do an actual voiceover for your final production. As an alternative, you can use captions either as a replacement for the audio or to complement it. Here was a training video we used that had no audio at all, so we just used captions here to convey the information, and that works fine, and that makes it a lot less complicated to do. So doing the editing, there's a variety of editing softwares. There is so free versions are pretty good because the kinds of video editing you need to do are probably not going to be that sophisticated. So we use something called OpenShot, and that basically it's composed of basically your video, audio, and text file library. You just cram all those in here, and then you can add them to your video track, to your audio track. There's numerous tracks you can add, and then there's also context menus, and then when you're done, you just render everything into a probably an MP4 type file. Also, there's an Apple version of iMovie, similar type thing, where you have a library and you have different tracks you can use. So, but pretty easy to use. The review is important. You should have staff, users, stakeholders, people who can, critically look at this video. You should have them review that. And especially for anything safety related, you definitely don't want to be going off in the wrong direction with regard to safety. Just remember your audience, make sure the vocabulary is accessible, and make sure, and then obviously they can review it to see if there's any technical mistakes. And just be aware it's going to take several iterations. And one other thing that I did run into was organizing the files. So I made the mistake of not creating a folder structure from the beginning. So, and this is, see, these files can really get out of hand. So I had raw video, I had edited video, I had final video, I had text for the instructions, I had text for the list of video shots, I had text that was used for the synthetic audio, text for captions. So these are all things that, you know, that there's so many different types of files, and it can be really confusing. And also the actual audio files too. So organizing these things, just be aware, in addition to having a file structure, make sure that, you know, be aware that they're just very large video files, especially very large files, they can be cumbersome to work with, especially when you have multiple versions. And I have like 56 gigabytes in mine, and still growing. So if you're storing files locally, just keep a backup. So I'm going to hand this over to Dave Jones, and he's going to talk about software training.
All right, thanks, Eric. Okay, get myself situated here. Get that out of the way. There we go. Come on. Let's get this just a second. Come on. Sorry, folks, 1 second. No, 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 do not do that. Okay, percent.
David, I can share my screen if it's easier, and you can.
Oh, there we go. It just took a second. Okay, sorry about that, folks. Okay, so so thanks, Eric. So we put together some software training videos as well from our side at the University of Penn. So this is just some lessons learned from that experience that we can share for others that might want to do any other kind of thing. So we put together software training we put together some training videos for CAD. At Penn, we use Layout Editor. And so if you want to check out our videos, that's up on YouTube. We also put together some videos for Beamer as well. I know some folks out there use Beamer. So here's some tips for putting software training together. So first thing, obviously, is you have to prepare your content, right? If you're looking to put this to video, my guess is that you might have already done this in person with your users. But if you haven't, this step is pretty critical. You'll want to give the training in person a few times before you put the training to videos. You'll definitely need some live feedback from users before you actually take all the time it's going to take to put these to good videos. So especially when it comes to software, there are some things you need to consider, including determining what steps you need in addition to the installation. Like a good example is that for CAD, we found that setting everybody to the same grid size is really important, because otherwise everybody gets lost, we'll say. But there might be some other steps in addition to just installing the software that you need beforehand. And so if you do this live with people first, it'll help you flesh some of these things out. Also, like how to most effectively explain each topic. Really, there's no substitute for live feedback, and also determining the optimum order to explain these things to folks. So we've also found that that if there's any kind of fundamental concepts that you want to convey first, you'll be best off giving any slides at the beginning, like before you jump into the software, and then you want to sort of lay the foundation with some slides and then go into actually using the software. And this way you eliminate the need to switch back and forth between slides and using the software. So that from our experience where that works really well. So let's talk about a little bit about the how we would recommend to structure these online training or these software trainings. So what I see people do often is they'll just shoot one long video for the whole training. And there's some pros and cons to doing it that way. Now, some pros would be, well, it's a lot less time consuming to put it together. You can just sit down, hit record, and just record one long take and you're done, basically. But just, you know, it's a lot less time consuming for you that way. But on the downside, if you want to make any change at all, you would have to theoretically have to reshoot the entire training, which, you know, so then it's a lot less flexible to change. You also, it's harder to search the video by topic. So for example, if a user wants to just really quickly look up one thing, they'll either have to go through the whole video and figure out where it is, or if you have annotations, they have to like go through the annotations. They would have to go to the video and then look through the annotations. They can't just search for it directly on YouTube. But what we prefer, at least I prefer, is that if you break the training down into a bunch of smaller videos, personally, I like that a lot better. It allows users to search for topics individually. So if somebody goes into YouTube and types, you know, layout editor, draw boxes, they can just find the video right away. Especially and we found, actually, I wasn't expecting this, but I've gotten a lot of feedback from some of our graduate students that said, hey, I haven't used the software in a while, and this was really, really helpful because I just needed this one thing. I just needed like a quick refresher. I just looked it up and I found it right away. And so that's been really helpful for people too. So people really like that they can just search for topics quickly and just get exactly what they need and be on their way. And so that's always a good thing. And also users can save their progress pretty easily. They can just stop on video number 12 and then pick it up again, you know, and then go back to video 13, let's say. So we like it that way. It also makes it more flexible for making updates. If you want to change a section, you just have to change one video rather than changing the entire course. So the cons there would be that it takes a lot more time for you to put together. Excuse me, but in my opinion, at least, it's worth the effort. The end product will be much better as a result. Now, a couple of notes on setup. No, I definitely recommend to, if you're going to do this, check with your university to see if they have any of their own recording equipment. So we found, at least for us at Penn, our library has like a podcasting studio basically, and so we got to use that, and that actually ended up working out really well for us. They have really good equipment, not just whatever microphone my computer tends to have. They have like good professional grade microphones and headphones and so on. So that's really good. So I would definitely tap into your library. They probably also have staff working at said library that can help you troubleshoot any problems that you might run into. So that's always a plus, saves a lot of time on your end. Also, kind of a little known fact is that PowerPoint has, if you're going to record any slides, PowerPoint has a record slideshow feature. So if you're going to record audio with slides, the record slideshow feature works really well, because then that way you're not just recording it with like a screen capture software. The record slideshow feature in PowerPoint lets you sync the voiceovers with the animations on the slides really nicely. That's also another thing that makes it easier to make changes later. If you want to change anything, you wouldn't have to go and re-record the entire thing. You could just make the one change, and I ended up doing that a few times. So that's really nice. Now for the actual software training videos, you'll want to use like a screen recording software. And in my case, I use Bandicam. It's just what I found that's free. It leaves a watermark in the video, but I'm okay with it, frankly. So yeah, there's that. So just another note on preparing content. So I think it's also helpful, especially for a video-based training like we did, to sort of help set the expectations at the beginning. So I called it a how to take this training slide. So it helps, gives the users, when somebody just clicks on your video, they just see, like, basically on the second slide, you know, they get some, we can help them set expectations for how long the training is going to take, maybe some tips and so on. And I'll show you an example on the next slide. It also, we've said it, and every other presenter has said it, and I'm going to say it. Preparation is obviously really important, but more specifically, you need to write a script, because you're going to find that when you go to record the videos, if you try to just wing it, you'll find yourself kind of stumbling uhs and ums, you know, the little platitudes like that. You know, even I'm just doing it now. but doing the diligence and doing the work of writing out the script is critical, because otherwise you're probably going to end up stumbling through things a lot. Even if you've given the training, like I gave it like dozens of times, and I was still stumbling through it when I actually recorded it. So it's especially critical for recording good, emphasis on error-free trainings. It'll take some practice, and it'll usually take a couple of takes to get things right, or to get things like well polished. So you'll probably find that you want to practice this. So this is the example of that, how to take this training slide. So basically at the beginning I said, okay, how long is the training going to take? Then, you know, that's the first thing usually people want to know. Next, you know, maybe any helpful tips in the case of the CAD training. I always find that it's a lot easier for people to use an actual mouse rather than your laptop's touchpad. That's just a tip from experience in teaching people this. Works really well. So any other potential tips, you can put that there. And basically anything else you'd want to include, I said, okay, here's how you download it, install the software. Plus also, here's how you can reach out to us for any help, or if you'd like to let us look at your design. So in this particular case. And with that, I'd like to turn it back over to Angela.
Okay, thank you. And then, yeah, I just saw some question pop up. Oops. Did I share the right screen? Wait. Sorry. Okay. All right. So, yeah, with that, I just want to provide a few resources. And so obviously we've recorded this presentation and are going to share the presentation, so you guys can click all of these links, but this was a little bit of a dump where you can sort of search through some of these links and see, get onboarded sort of on some of the content that we talked about. And then obviously next we'll have questions. If the slide wants to, yeah, so Ryan Nichols, so he asked me about, can we talk a little bit more about the process clinic and if users or staff are finding it useful and or productive. So I do have some staff, I think, on the call. I wonder if I can put them on the spot and talk about it, or at least put them into the question box. But I think for the most part, they were reasonably helpful. I'm allowing Phil to talk and Rich to talk. And let's see if anyone else is on here. But I think, oh, and Michelle. So I have allowed you to talk if you'd like to talk, but overall, I do think they're helpful. I know we're also to time, so if anyone needs to drop off, obviously happy to drop off, but I'll be staying on. But yeah, Rich, Phil, and Michelle, do you guys want to add anything?
I can try talking. I don't know if you can.
Oh, there we go. Yep.
Okay.
I can hear you.
The process clinic is a meeting we have every 2 weeks where the staffers we have two kind of main nano fabs on Stanford campus, so that we all kind of get together in one room. Over the last month, it's been via Zoom, and users are welcome to come and talk about, have questions about tool selection, or if they're troubleshooting, or if they're trying to do process integration. And we also have some veteran, extremely knowledgeable lab members that also generally come and help answer these questions too. So it's a really good shared learning of like kind of across the big spectrum of lab users. And we do find it useful very often if somebody who's brand new comes and has no idea, has never done fab, and doesn't have a lot of lab members in their group that can help them get started. They'll usually come to a couple process clinics to start kind of scoping out their process.
Yeah. Thanks, Michelle.
Yeah, and I have a comment that
Oh yeah, Rich, go ahead.
we have a, and I hope this comes across correctly. We have a wide spectrum of users, and some of them want to skip a lot of steps and think that everything works nicely in PowerPoint. And like, you know, you might have stripping the wafer could be your biggest problem. And they just, of course, they just assume that that works because they went directly from etch to the next step. And you say, well, you know, just think about all the steps. That's one. And then also I found fascinating, some people in the process clinic want to be so scientific, they want to almost reinvent every step. And it's like, for you, I say, no, it's already been done. Stay calm. We'll get you from point A to point B. And if there's any reason to go off on tangential investigations, that's fine. But we have a user now who's wonderful, but she wants to delve into everything to such a degree that sometimes I say, well, let's get from A to B, and then when you have your first proof of concept sample, then you can go back, you can backtrack a bit. So a lot of times it's not necessarily the exact specific detail about how you're going to etch it. It's more about the approach. But okay.
Yeah.
I hope that made sense.
Yeah. And then I'm just going through the questions one by one. So then the training videos, how do you deal with updating videos? One additional negative to the high workload is that it's harder to update. And I would definitely agree. I think David Jones mentioned, you know, splitting up the video so you only have to adapt one section, which has been nice. And I would also say that sometimes we really just would record. In the past, we actually made little GIFs or GIFs. I don't know the correct pronunciation of that, but for one of the tools, the Disco Wafer Saw, we actually did a series of GIFs to sort of manipulate the different types of steps and then actually put that along with an SOP. So then we could change the SOP and tweak the SOP as needed. So that was kind of nice, and a sort of workaround between fixing a longer video. And then I don't know, David, if you want to add to that.
Yeah, I mean, having the video split up definitely, I think definitely helps. It's like, yeah, because then it's just, you just don't have as much, you can just update the one part.
Yeah, or
I'd say also, even like for mine, which were longer than Dave's, you know, it does, I mean, it's like anything, you know, I mean, we probably, truth be told, probably some of our printed SOPs maybe are not updated either. I do have to say the editing software, the video editing software, makes it pretty easy to just slip in something new there. It's really not too bad. Of course, you got to go capture it. You can't just like type it out on a typewriter, on your computer and put it in. But the editing software does make it pretty easy to do it. You know, if you just have to be inclined to actually update it.
Yeah, and then Katie Dean, and maybe this is for Maude more, can you develop directly in Coursera or edX, or do you need third-party software like Adobe Captivate or Storyline? Their university uses Saba, which requires a third party. It sounds complicated. Do you have any experience with Captivate or Storyline? So Katie, I guess I'm sort of assuming that is like a screen capture software maybe, or
Yeah,
is it not?
Those softwares. I was going to say for Coursera, and I don't know, edX, Angela can answer, but Coursera, you are not directly developing any content in the platform itself necessarily. I guess there is some intrinsic, like the things, the assessments and adding questions and like that is all done through the Coursera platform. But in terms of video content, you're just uploading video into the Coursera platform. So you will have to have something on the back end to create all your video content. Hopefully that answers your question. So I don't know offhand, because so that's one example of where the online learning office at the university can be helpful, is that they did all of our video capture and editing. And so I'm not sure exactly what software they use, but I would imagine that that's just dependent, you know, any video editing software is going to be fine. So.
Oh, I looked up Adobe Captivate, and yeah, so it sounds like this is sort of building an online course, but more in situ and then uploading it somewhere. edX and Coursera, I think, are nicer because a lot of it's pre-formatted. There's obviously drawbacks because then you have limitations on what functionalities you have, but I like Coursera and edX because a lot of it's built in, and a lot of the things, you know, you can already use and or sort of slightly adapt and or squeeze into what you need. So that has been good for us. But yeah, let me know because I'm curious. And then John is asking, have any sites transitioned or plan to transition to training videos to replace in-person equipment training? What have been the results so far? So I'll answer for our facility. We have implemented XPS, SEM, and a Keyence microscope training. All of them are sort of still a hybrid version where I mentioned people or the users will come read and watch videos or go through the course or that particular section, go to an in-person training, and then take the quiz and then do a final sign-off. So it's still very much a hybrid. Overall, I think it's been quite useful because there have been people that are able to, as well as plasma etching. Sorry, I'm forgetting a few tools. But anyway, we have implemented, but it's still very much a hybrid where they have to go read the content, take a quiz, then do the final in person. And overall, it's been good. It expedites training quite a bit, especially when it comes to onboarding an especially new user. We've also seen some users just get turned away in the sense, in a good way, where, oh, they realize that this particular tool is something that they don't need in their research. So there's that. And then Eric and David, I don't know if you want to add anything.
Yeah, I'd say we, so we have, for certain tools, we have gone to only video training, and that really, I mean, you can't just do that. You really got to have some sort of quiz afterwards just to at least confirm they looked at it, confirm they kind of understood it, and you know, a pretty rigorous quiz. So and like take like spinners are a good example. I think it's a reasonable thing to you know, have somebody train using video on something like a spinner or a simple etch tool. We're also working right now on videos for other more complicated tools. Right now, I think those are going to just be a supplement to the in-person training, and that would, the nice thing about the training is that it's the same every time, right? Because it's the same video every time, so you're getting consistent training. That's pretty important. I think having it at least as a supplement, that's pretty good. But I think it's a big leap to go from having the training video to having a training video only. That's kind of a big leap for certain tools. Some of the more complicated tools or more expensive tools that somebody can break.
Yeah, and I just want to add that, you know, when it comes to these training pieces, some of them can just be an overview. They don't have to always be tool specific. They don't always have to replace an SOP. I think the big thing is just, you know, preventing yourself from constantly repeating yourself on some of the basics when it comes to those things. So there's that.
Oh, I was going to add in a couple points. So the RTNN's Coursera course is what Angela just spoke about. It's mostly just an overview of different tool types. So that may just be useful. I wouldn't recreate our course. So if you want, let's plug our own courses. Angela can speak to her course as well. I wouldn't recreate content that already exists. I mean, I would, you know, if you can give people background information via videos that already exist and have them use that as part of their training, that's great. And there was another point I was going to make that I lost my train of thought. Sorry, my son.
Well, Maude, I think that one of the other reasons for doing the videos is we wanted, I mean, at some point we want to really have a good library to share with at least at the beginning of the whole NNCI network. So that people can, because a lot of these spinners are the same, you know, some of the etchers are the same. So
Yeah, it's our hope to, someday we can sort of collaborate on some of these videos as well, or at least reference each other's videos and things like
Mhm.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, with that, in the spirit of networking, yeah, we'd like to, oops, oh no, thank you. Can you still see my screen?
Yeah. Oh, and I remembered the last thing I was going to share is that we do have we do have our Coursera course, but then a couple of our facilities do have kind of what David was alluding to, is that they have short little training videos that are more just refreshers that don't require, I mean, you still have to plan them, but they don't require quite as much development on the, you can go in and shoot them yourself. And they're more just reminders of how to do something really quick. So that might be a more useful thing than trying to replace like exact whole in-person trainings. I think that's going to be complicated, especially because you're going to want somebody that's a trained staff or staff person to sign off on somebody being capable. And I don't think just watching a video, because that's, as we mentioned, people will play the video and then take the quiz and maybe able to kind of pass it without ever stepping foot in the facility. And I don't think it will ever be a pure replacement or whole replacement. Okay.
Yeah. All right. Well, with that, I think we're going to end the meeting, and I think there will be a survey that pops up. Please fill that out if you don't mind. And we will send out sort of the recording once we get approval and things like that. Okay. So have a great weekend, everyone.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks for coming.